You're listening to the Red Dog Road podcast. Glad to have you back with us again. I'm Nick Pinizzato, your host, here with my buddy, the doctor, Mike Groman. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing great. How are you doing this week?
You know, I'm doing pretty well. I could have done without the 90 plus degree weather that we've had, especially as someone that would like to get on to the water and do some fishing. So I could have done without that, but it's been a pretty good week so far. How about you?
Yeah, the same thing here. We actually had some plants we wanted to get into the garden, but we held off. I have 2 trees to plant as well. And with that sweltering heat, I decided that I'm going to hold off a little bit.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't. When it's 90 plus in the part of the world that we live in, and the humidity starts creeping up there, it's not a comfortable thing. So it makes you get lethargic pretty quickly, and it's slowed things down. But I think we're up for some change here, which is a good thing. And it didn't stop me from getting out and doing a few things here this past week. Actually, before the heat wave hit, was able to do a little more fishing. Finally landed one of the big brown trout that I couldn't land the other day when I was losing them. So that was really cool. Incidentally, though, and when I was doing that, I ended up using a fly that I tied probably at least 15 years ago. And so I show up to the stream, and you have a game plan, right? Like the last time I was there, they were taking like nymphs or and a crest bug actually was working well for me last time. So I go with that game plan, and it's not working. But I happened to notice that the fish that I could see were really aggressive. So I look into my box, and here are these old streamers I tied like long ago, and put a Mickey fin on there, and like the first cast, threw it out there and ended up and landing this trout. And with as old as the flies were, I just assumed they maybe got a little dry rotted or something, because the thread on the head had come loose. So it was a one fly fish, but it did inspire the story that I just recently posted about sort of rebuilding flies that fall apart, which is something. I'm just not one of those guys that I feel like if a fly gets tore up that I just pitch it. I actually bring the hooks back and take a razor blade, clean them up, and rebuild them. I don't know if that's something you've ever done, but that's what I do.
I mean, in some situations, there's been times where I have had to do that. I've never done it on the stream. I've heard some people try and do these hack job repairs on the stream when something was working. They were down to their last fly, and you really can't make anything else work. I've done those weird hack job repairs, not officially on the tying bench, but trying to de-thread one fly so I could just kind of do some type of a half-hearted, overhand knot to hold it together for a few more casts before the end of the day. But no, I've never brought them home and really rebuilt them from the ground up.
Well, I'm certainly not one of those guys that you hear about that sit there with little vices that they have on their body, and they tie up what they see. I mean, I'm not that mad at the trout to do that, and I think when you get into that, it's probably not as much fun. But at any rate, if you are interested in sort of an entertaining story with a neat little backstory, I just posted this up to the Red Dog Road website, reddogroad.net, and I believe the title is I think it's something to the effect of "I saved the lives of flies" or something along that, or something. Or I bring flies back to life. That's what it is. I
Okay,
can't
there you
remember
go.
the title of my own article. But at any rate, check it out. And I think it was a fun story to write. Maybe you'll find it entertaining. So, speaking of entertaining, Mike, you you texted me a picture the other day, and at first I wasn't sure what you were trying to show. I thought you had found a pair of boots like in the woods or something, but that's not actually what happened, is it?
No, this exactly goes along with your dry rot story. But as everyone has been following us has probably aware, I'm getting back into fly fishing. I've been away from it just because of how busy my life has been for the past few years. And I shouldn't say the past few, because the picture of the fishing license that I sent you that I took off of my vest was 2007. So it has been a while. But this past weekend, I went up to our place up in New York because I had to mow. And I took I got my new license. I put everything together. You can tell I was pretty excited. And I was going to hit a stream on the way home from New York. So I was doing just a 1-day trip, drive up, mow, and then come home. And surprisingly, I was really amped up because it was going to be a great day. When I was mowing, I saw 10 deer on our place just moving around. I have from where I can, I almost mow 2 acres. And from where I was mowing, I have a couple food plots that I can see. And throughout the course of 2.5 hours of mowing, and then another, hour of push mowing and weed whacking, I saw 10 deer moving in and off different food plots. And I was just having a great day, really enjoyed myself. Turn around, come home, think, okay, I'm going to get some fly fishing done on the way home, hit some of those north central streams in Pennsylvania. And it got too late. It took me too long to mow, got home, but I was heck bent on being able to fish that week. So I went out after work, and even though it was hot, I thought I'm just going to go and worst case scenario, practice casting, kind of get that feel back. So as I was walking across the stream, I felt something underneath my foot. And we've all been there where a stick or a part of a limb gets stuck in your boot laces and it just kind of interferes with your sense of feel. And so I finished walking across because it didn't seem like it was holding me back. I look at the bottom of my boot and there's half of my felt sole on my my wading boots peeled off. And so I sit down, I grab that and I give it just a gentle tug. It's almost like, peeling a banana, it comes right off. And I'm sitting there just completely dejected because I was so excited to be able to fish. And so me being the stubborn me that I am, I said, well, I'm going to sit here and watch the water, even though it was pretty low because of the heat. I'm going to just kind of watch and just maybe do some practice casts just to get my feel back. And so I did that for about 5 minutes, and then I got bored and I figured, well, I'm going to try and, fish this little riffle right here. So I put on a nymph, made 2 casts, and all of a sudden I had a fish. Now, granted, it was a creek chub or a creek chub, however our listeners would like to pronounce that.
The official term is crick on the Red Dog Road podcast.
Okay, so
crick chub.
So I catch this little, and it was little. It was probably 4 inches long, and so I didn't get skunked. But I get back up to the truck and I start walking, and it just feels like that boot's getting worse by the second. And so I send you this picture of my dry rotted, probably 19, 20-year-old wading boots. So needless to say, good thing Father's Day is around the corner. I have a new pair of lightweight waders and wading boots on the way. So they should be here Saturday.
Well, I'm going to try and post that photo with the podcast story because it literally looks like you found a pair of boots like along the way and you just picked them up or you're taking a picture of them and wondered how they got there. But yeah, not exactly the way, the wheels coming off is not how you envision your first fly fishing trip of the year, but it sounds like you're about ready to redeem yourself here.
I am.
Good. Well, so we had a really cool conversation with Mark Zagger, Coyote University. And so it's interesting. You would think we were just going to talk about all the details about how to trap coyotes, but we got into some really cool stuff with Mark. It was much bigger than just trapping. And we got into some big picture conservation stuff. And he's just a really cool, sort of everyday guy that happens to, over a 3-week period, trap like 100 plus coyotes. I don't remember the number, but it was ridiculous.
I mean, he consistently averages over 100 per year. And I'm pretty sure from listening to his other interviews that he's done, his biggest number has been close to up to 180. He does 150, 130 years pretty consistently in the East Coast, so east of the Mississippi. So this is someone that has a lot of history, a lot of skin in the game. But if you have to think about it, if you're not a trapper, there's a lot of different modes of trapping, including cable restraints or snares. But New York, those are illegal, or they're not legal at this time. So he only does it with foothold or leg hold traps. So that's really impressive to be able to think about wrangling down 100 plus, up 130, 140 coyotes a year to step on a little 3-inch pan in this greater world of the outdoors. So he definitely has a specific talent and knack for doing that.
It's impressive. And I know I was really impressed, but not, even beyond just the coyote trapping. And I think when our listeners hear it, they'll see where I'm going there. But he had big shoes to fill, because Lisa Williams, the week before, her podcast has done really well. And I've heard from several people about how much they enjoyed it. And by the way, if you haven't heard that episode, I encourage you to go back. We talked with Lisa Williams from the Pennsylvania Game Commission. She's a rock star ruffed grouse biologist, among other things. And we just had a great time with her, and that one went really well. But then Mark comes on, and we take a little different approach and get into predators, and he was awesome. So I think our folks are going to enjoy this.
I think they will. And there's a lot there that touches on a lot of different topics, and all of them are very interesting.
All right, let's go ahead and jump into the interview with Mark Zagger. It is my pleasure to welcome our guest to the show today on the Red Dog Road podcast, Mr. Mark Zagger, Coyote U, Coyote University, which I am dying to learn more about. I've done a little bit of research and just some really awesome stuff. And Mark, thanks for joining us on the show today. It's good to see you.
My pleasure. Flattered to be here.
So, Mark, one of the things you'll find out, Mark, right off the bat is just how poor of a job that we do as hosts on this show. So I immediately said, good to see you. So no one listening to this will see you, but we're all on a Zoom call, which is how we record the podcast here. And over my shoulder, my background is a coyote picture that I put up today in honor of Mark. It's kind of what he's known for. And we're gonna get into that in a second. But if you don't mind, Mark, just tell us a little bit about you. I think people would be interested to know how you came into doing what you're doing, and just your background, your childhood, how you ended up into the outdoors.
Sure. My name is Mark Zagger. I'm from Cortland, Ohio, born and raised in Ohio, and I moved to New York in 1988. I got transferred up here with my company that I got hired by out of college, FedEx, and actually followed a girl up here that we broke up 6 months later, and I thought it was the worst decision of my life, and frankly, it was the best decision of my life. But at the time, you couldn't have told me that. But that said, I came from a hunting and fishing family for sure. On the Zagger side of my family, my grandfather was a typical Pennsylvania deer hunter, and my father was an avid fisherman and hunter. None of them trapped, and I happened to, right time, right place, be in 5th, 6th grade when the fur boom was starting, and when everybody was getting into trapping for, all the, probably in hindsight, some of the wrong reasons, only for money. And that's a whole nother story. But that all said, I got into it probably initially for those reasons, thinking I could make $12 on a muskrat and $50 on a raccoon. And this was in 1978, when that was a lot of money. It still is. So, you go back now to those classes and the kids that I trapped with or against when I was in elementary and in high school. And I could honestly say that I think I'm the only one that still does it, which is probably the reason I'm sitting in front of you here today, because something resonated with me with trapping that it didn't with others. And it wasn't just about the fur check. It was about a lot of other things. And, a lot of what we're going to talk about today is the outdoors and the love thereof, and trying to explain that to, especially to people that maybe don't have that same sense or that same kind of feeling. So whatever it was that my grandparents and my dad instilled in me about wanting to be an outdoorsman and hunting and fishing, the trapping is what really ended up kind of defining me to some degree. And yes, I still turkey hunt. And yes, I still deer hunt. And yes, I still occasionally wet a line, but coyotes are it for me, and I should just say trapping in general. It wasn't always coyotes, but and there may be a time in my life where it's no longer coyotes. It might be mink or weasels or fisher or something else. But I think for the rest of my life, I'll be doing it somehow, some way each fall.
And so, Mark, to kind of get back and keep pushing back into that childhood era of yours, how was the wilds of Ohio? I mean, I believe that you were really interested in just nature and wildlife in general. And is that what drew you outside? And is that what you believe was one of the reasons that have kept you outside for so long?
I'm probably older than you two, but, to have to explain why you were outdoors only makes sense when you think about today's society and today's kids. We didn't have a choice. My mom used to say to us, don't come home till the noon whistle. And she really had no idea where we were. And I don't think she really cared if we came with the noon whistle, but if we wanted to eat, it was lunch would be served. So we created our own world. I lived in a rural part of Ohio for sure, farm country. And we were always in the creek and in the stream and in the lake, and we were always catching salamanders and crayfish and frankly, probably shooting things with our BB guns that we shouldn't have been shooting, and all those kind of things that you do when you're a kid, a country kid, building forts and having bonfires. And I think the best compliment I could give my parents or my mom was that she didn't know where we were, but she trusted that we were going to do the right thing. And if we got hurt or injured, we put a Band-Aid on it. And when we were kids, I don't know about you guys, our knees were just that red mercurochrome stuff in our elbows from wrecking our bikes and from falling down. And that used to be the cure-all, I guess. Slap that stuff on it and a couple Band-Aids and you were good to go. But my dad always just say to us, when we get hurt, my dad was a Marine, he'd say, if you're going to be stupid, you got to be tough. And that really was no consolation as a kid crying in front of your parents. But no, I mean, like I said, it's funny to have to explain it, but no, we were always outside. And it might have been playing hide and seek. It might have been playing catch with a baseball. We were very, very, very active in sports. And it was very normal for us to walk around the neighborhood and try and find a bunch of kids to put together a game of football or baseball or just catch or whatever we did. And we hated to come inside because that meant we probably had to do homework or help with some kind of chores.
Yeah, I remember inside was always punishment for us.
Right.
It sounds like we all had similar sort of upbringings. It definitely resonates when you say about not being able to go inside. I definitely remember my parents saying, "Get outside," and we didn't have air conditioning anyway, so it was better outside than it was inside, especially in the summer. You're actually touching on something that is, I think, one of our challenges in society today, and that is that people have this real disconnect from a lot of things in the world, from where food comes from. There are people, believe it or not, who have never been to a farm or seen cows in a field, for example, to give one example. And then this whole issue of predator and prey and how that happens in the wild. I used to, earlier in my career, worked on anti-hunting, anti-trapping issues with an organization called the Sportsman's Alliance, and worked a lot with trappers like yourself to just I don't know that you're going to try to convince somebody that's already convinced one way or another, but you can certainly grab some of those people in the middle. But I think it just comes back to that whole disconnect of where things come from and getting outside and being outside. And so I appreciate you bringing that up.
That's what.
Now, one of the things that I picked up from that is you said about how different people look at us as outdoors persons or outdoor people. And I had a lady that lived right next door to me, and everyone that knows me realized that I live in suburbia, even though I love to be outside. We only own a half an acre here. And I had the first 2 months that I moved into this house, they had called the state police on me once because I was shooting my bow in the backyard. The Humane Society or whatever the county dog warden is stopped over at least twice because I had bird dogs up on barrels teaching them how to whoa and be steady. And a lot of our connection with these individuals that are uneducated is that moment to educate them. I had my neighbor lady walk up to me one time who wasn't a big fan of me in general because she knew that I hunted. And her line was, "I know that you kill stuff, but there's a bird that fell out of its nest. What can you do about that?" And my wife and I went and picked it up and actually gave it some nourishment. We actually mixed up some sugar water for it, and to watch it actually take its beak and suck water in to give it some strength. And then we actually nursed it back for a couple days, and then we actually returned it back to the wild, out to its nest. And actually it's hung around the house for months, like the rest of that summer. But we're really looked at as these killers or these really unusual individuals that just, I guess, don't have feelings, but there's a certain connection that we have in the wild that I think these individuals don't understand. And Mark, that's something that I believe you've experienced in your life as well, correct?
Absolutely. Outside of coyotes in this conversation today, I have a career, I do other things. I've got a successful business that I'm involved in, and I rarely talk about it with anybody. I just don't think people really care. But I do I get all the phone calls, all the emails, all the texts. Hey, I just saw something in my backyard. What is this? I took a picture of it. I noticed this kind of scat. What is it? I've got these kind of baby birds. What is it? So I'm kind of known as that wildlife guy. And yes, a trapper and a hunter, but also it's not just about any kind of wildlife question. I get the calls because even though we live in a small community here that's somewhat rural, a lot of the people that we run around with are suburban folks that really just have never had that, the word we keep using is connection. So, and I think they find it confusing, to have somebody as knowledgeable about wildlife and nature, but then on the other side of it, maybe taking from that in their minds, and you have to explain it. And as Nick said earlier, you're not going to reach the people that are too far one way or the other, but it's the people in the middle you try to. And I think about myself, as I'm mowing the lawn, I'm swerving to miss honeybees. I'm swerving to miss tree frogs that are on the ground, or toad. Just yesterday, there's a Boone and Crockett toad on our property that I keep seeing. This thing's got to be some kind of record. And he's at the back of our patio, and I keep swerving to miss him. And I don't know how old he is and how many years I've been swerving to miss him. I've got 3 or 4 bird nests on my barn that are causing me problems. But there was a time in my life when I probably would have knocked them down, but I'm like, let it go. It's not that big a deal, and they'll be gone in a few weeks. And so I think as much as we talk about coyotes and white-tailed deer and turkeys, the other animals, all the flora and all the fauna are what people like us really truly appreciate. We see the big picture and we see how it all interconnects, and we see that balance that everybody always talks about, that balance in nature. And on our little farmette here, our little 60 acres, I'm measuring my life by some of the trees that I've planted on this property. And as I see them grow, I can't tell you the feeling I have. It's a sense of pride, but it's also a sense of accomplishment that I took this little stick and now it's 30 feet tall, and I've got hundreds of them that way. And that someday somebody else is going to really appreciate this and not really know what I did to get them there. But that's the kind of thing that's hard to put into words, I think. And that's where I think outsiders get a little confused as to how therefore I can go out and kill 130 coyotes this year. That's where they do that balance of what I don't get it. So
it is hard to articulate, and that's part of the challenge, right? It's something that we all feel and that we know, or is part of who we are. But it's very hard if someone were to say, just to answer the simple question, why do you hunt, or why do you trap, or why do you fish? It's very hard because it's such a personal answer. It's many different reasons, and then to take that a step further, why do you hunt, but yet you'll save a bird that got injured in your backyard or something along those lines? And it's hard to articulate, and that's been one of our challenges in the outdoor community, is that because it's so hard to articulate, we tend just not to talk about it. We don't mind sharing our pictures of things that we catch or shoot, and that gets us into trouble as well. So communication is part of it. And as I'm thinking about communication, I'm going to ask you a 2-part question. And the first one would be, I'm interested to know what your thoughts are about the future of trapping. We know that we have challenges, but also, what do you wish people knew about trapping that the average person almost definitely doesn't know or understand about it?
Sure. Ever since I started, trapping's been under fire, right? Of all the animal use, I don't want to call them sports, but in that realm, anything to do with even animal husbandry and farming, trapping has kind of been the front issue because of a lot of the misconceptions with traps and what people think are traps with teeth and, amputators and those type of things. That is clearly, obviously not the case. One time, I had 8 or 9 coyotes in the back of the truck, and one of my farmers flagged me down, and I've shown him the coyotes, but mainly what I wanted to show him was their feet, their paws, and how, unless I pointed it out, you really wouldn't notice any difference. And he says to me, "Oh, I'm surprised that their feet aren't cut off." And this is a farmer. This is an animal use guy. You understand what I'm saying? Here's a guy that, while he's not a trapper, I would think that he would have known more about it. And he didn't. So if a guy like him, who's really close to touching me as far as, in that realm, I can't imagine what somebody in New York City or LA is thinking, right? So, that all said, because of all these misconceptions, trapping is an easy target. And I would say that, when you go around the country and you see some of the states that no longer allow trapping, you'd be probably surprised. A lot of big rural states, a lot of big western rural states, Colorado, Arizona, California for sure, which isn't that surprising, Washington. So, a long answer to a short question is, I'm worried that in my lifetime, trapping as I know it may not exist. That said, the need for the control of these animals, all of them, is always going to be needed. And that's going to create opportunities for people in the nuisance wildlife business and the animal damage control. The bottom line is, especially with beaver and coyotes, these are animals that, if left unchecked, they're going to create issues with man. And at the end of the day, that's on us because, we've moved to some degree into their territory. We've built sheep pastures and cattle pastures in the heart of coyote country, or we build houses really close to wetlands, and therefore we're going to have issues with beaver and muskrats and those types of things. So I think at the end of the day, as much as we're swinging the bat and fighting, our demographic is shrinking every day. There's not a lot of new recruitment with trapping and it goes back to what we talked about earlier with the new generations of being more in front of computers and video games and not necessarily in the outdoor pursuits like we were raised. And because of that, even guys I know that are really good trappers, a lot of them aren't being successful in getting their own children to jump in because of all those other distractions, right? And I don't mean to paint a negative picture, but I'm being straight with you. I think, every day, if you pay attention to, you were part of the Sportsman's Alliance, if you pay attention, almost every day there's a new state or a new county or a new something against some type of fur harvesting or trapping. So as our demographic shrinks, New York State, I think, has 10,000 licensed trappers, compared to how many hunters and fishermen, right? Hundreds of thousands probably. So we're just a very small demographic fighting. And I think at the end of the day, we're going to really need to rely on other groups like hunters and houndsmen and Sportsman Alliance to help us. And winning those guys over, or winning those groups over, has been successful in some cases. In some cases, it's not. That you could imagine the conflict at some point between some houndsman groups and maybe trappers, and trying to right that ship and get everybody on the same page and say, hey guys, kumbaya here. We're all in this together. If we lose trapping, it's like the gun rights people, right? If you lose the semi-automatic, they don't just go away. Now they want the pistols. Now they want the shotguns and rifles. So I think if sportsmen's groups realize that, hey, we got to help the trappers, because once that's gone, they're coming after us next, right? So, that all said, it's not a perfect rosy picture between lack of recruitment and just the new view of the world. But I think to every action is a reaction. And I think people who want to continue trapping will be able to do so probably much more successfully financially if they just get into animal damage control or nuisance wildlife. We don't have phone books anymore, if I'm going to date myself. But if you were to pick up a Syracuse, New York phone book, which is the biggest city I live next to, there's 10, 12, 13, 14 guys in there that do squirrels, bats, raccoons, muskrats, that type of thing. It's turned into a business. It's turned into an industry. And I see that happening also with things like beaver and coyotes. I apologize. The second question, two-part question.
Well, yeah. And since you touched on it, I'm going to ask a next question, and then I'll turn it back to Mike, because I know he has a bunch. But this whole idea of controlling nuisance wildlife with trapping, and I want to focus on a specific topic. So I work in deer, and one of the things I often hear people talk about is the need to control coyotes because they are a predator of deer, primarily fawns. Although I think we've learned through some research that they're not as harsh on fawns as what people may have believed, which I think that's good. I think that I'm going to make a statement. You correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a coyote would much prefer a varmint type animal if they can get it, a raccoon, a rabbit, that type of thing. Although they can be very opportunistic when fawning happens if they get the chance. All of that being said, understanding the wide range that coyotes can cover, that they don't just live in your backyard forever. Can you really control a population through trapping? Or if the short answer is yes, my understanding is you can do it far better through trapping than you can through hunting them. So I just said a lot there, but I'll throw it over to you since you're the expert.
No, I would say a couple things. Yeah, a coyote makes its living largely eating mice and voles and those kind of animals, and deer are probably, and I know a lot of deer hunters are going to be rolling their eyes right now when I say it, but you kind of already touched on it. There was that famous coyote den that they put a camera on, and they had 21 or 22 fawns on it, and it went viral, and that was the end of it. And guilty as charged. They all knew it, but there's a symbiotic relationship between predator and prey, right? So whitetails are at all-time high, turkeys are at all-time high. So guess what? Their predator base is as well. And do coyotes take a few deer? Sure, but I don't really think the guy who laments the coyotes and deer usually the guy that had a bad deer season last year and looking for excuses, right? But I will say this on the control situation. I have properties where, whether Kansas or New York, where we roll in and we catch X amount of coyotes. And then from that point on, we never catch as many as we did that first year. So I think controlling of coyotes I look at it as on a micro basis. On a macro basis, it's very difficult, just like it's difficult to control whitetails or turkeys or anything. The easy ones next to town get wiped out, but then the mountains are full of them that no one ever touches, right? So that's where Mother Nature kicks in with parvo and mange and other things to help control them. So Mother Nature has kind of a stopgap there with coyotes and canids in general, that if they get a little too overpopulated, then they tend to have Mother Nature take over a little bit. But I know with the utmost confidence, and maybe some of your listeners would appreciate this, if I had a deer lease, if I leased 100 acres or I had 1,000 acres, yes, I think a long-term predator control program, especially germane to coyotes, will keep those coyotes in check. You're never going to eliminate them. The best analogy I have for you, every winter, you got to reset your mouse traps in your house for mice. You kill the 3 or 4 or 5 that come in every year, but that doesn't mean they're gone forever. Guess what? Next year, the whole new group gets born. It gets cold out and they move in. So, but you keep after it every year. And that's the best way you can look at it. You need to look at your properties the way you look at mice in your house.
So Mark, you use the term keep after it. And so there was something that you said there that really kind of struck home with me. And where you are today in your life, very successful trapper, a public figure in that way, well known within the trapping community, but you're also a successful businessman, successful husband. You're grooming your farmette with apple trees and so on. But talk about that drive, or that word strive that you use to push yourself forward, where that came from and what it meant to you.
Yeah. I figure you got one crack at this thing called life, and depending on what you believe in afterlife, but I'm trying to make the best of what's here in front of me now. But my mom and dad got divorced when I was very young, and I was not even 5 years old. And in 1970, that was very unusual. I remember there was only 2 kids in school that had divorced parents, me and Eddie Dujic. If Eddie Dujic's out there, I'm sorry, man. But now everybody's divorced, right? And, or I shouldn't say everybody, but it's much more common. So from the youngest of age, I was very close to my dad, and I saw my dad once a week at best. And my dad, he tried to cram in 7 days of fatherhood into one Sunday afternoon. And my dad was always pushing us and pushing me to be better. And that was his word, strive. It never seemed like it fit his normal conversation with me, because a lot of it was outside of that, much simpler. But every birthday card, every Christmas card, anytime he'd write me a note, he'd put that word in there. And we didn't come from a whole lot. And I remember thinking someday I'm going to be able to trap muskrats and not have leaky hip boots, and I'm going to be warm. I'm going to have good clothes. I'm going to have real traps or nice traps. I'm going to have a nice gun. And I might have had a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, frankly. I might have compared myself to a lot of the kids I knew that had a lot more than I did. One of my best stories was I was raking lawns and raking leaves and throwing hay all summer to buy a dozen traps or 2 or whatever it was. And a friend of mine, his name was Mark as well, he was a little more of a blue blood, and he decided he wanted to get into trapping. So me and him walked into the diner. His dad was at the diner every day, and he asked his dad for some money to go buy some traps. And his dad handed him $20-30, and just like that, I remember thinking to myself, just like that, what I've been working for all year. And Mark and I walked down to the hardware store, and he bought them, and he had a brand new shiny ones compared to my junk. And But guess who doesn't trap anymore? The other Mark. And so I think from the youngest of ages, I was always good in school. I always got good grades in high school and college. My brother did as well. I think we felt like we were better than what we had and what we could do. And my brother's very successful in life as well, and more so, frankly. But I think that's the baseline of everything that I've done. I've always wanted to do better, and I've always wanted to be, maybe in some cases, the best at something. And you know, the one thing with the coyote deal is, you know, I mentioned earlier that I turkey hunt and I deer hunt, but I can count on, you know, one hand how many days a year I do that. I'm monofocused. That's my thing. And you guys both know people like that. Maybe that's yourselves, whether it's a bow hunter or a waterfowl guy or whatever it is, the trophy whitetail guy that only holds out for the 170 plus, and he does the sheds and he does the food plots and he does the trail cameras. You know, I guess that's me with coyotes, and I don't have other distractions in that regard. But I've always been a trapper, but there was a time in my life where I was a wacko waterfowl hunter. And at the time I was that guy. You know, I had the bands around my neck. I traveled all around the country. I had the dog, I had the boat, I had the best decoys. And I wanted to be that guy. I wanted to walk into the boat launch and be that guy. And that, I think, all comes from that long-term, you know, drive to maybe be viewed differently than the way we were born and raised.
One of the things that struck me there is that the basis for everything that you said is really revolved around desire and hard work. There are no shortcuts. And so I thought I'd just share this funny story because it clicked in my mind as you were talking. And I was speaking at in an event one evening, and they had brought in a few different speakers. And one of the other guys that was speaking that night stood up there and looked out into the crowd, and he said, "I believe I was born to shoot big deer." I just thought, what a load of horse crap, right? So obviously, I really appreciate how you described that so much better, because you're not born to do any of this. It's what you put into it. You're gonna reap the rewards, reap what you sow. I mean, that's true, right?
For sure. And I, you know, trapping, there's no easy species to trap in numbers. And when I say that, coyotes are considered the kind of the pinnacle, the biggest challenge. You know, I see people looking down their nose at a guy that catches muskrats or beaver or whatever, but I don't look down my nose at a guy catches 1,000 muskrats or 200 beaver. There's nothing easy about any of those pursuits. Nothing. It's all work, you know, and it's hard work, and with probably little reward as far as if you're talking dollars and cents in your pocket compared to maybe what it once was. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again: the trapping is a commitment that, you know, if I jump in and I'm going to trap coyotes for the next 3 weeks, I'm in. Whether how bad the weather turns out to be, if we have a typhoon come through, whatever it is, I'm going. Whereas with some other outdoor pursuits, you can pick and choose, you know, to go on those days. And now, if it's November 7th, you're probably going no matter what if you're bow hunting. But short of that, you know, I've got a long-term commitment. You don't set traps today and pull them tomorrow and have any success at all. It's a long-term thing. And the old adage, the harder you work, the luckier you get. More so than any other thing that I do, it plays out in trapping for sure.
So Mark, it's easy for someone to sit there and listen to you and say, "Oh, well, you know, he just had to, you know, he just practically fell into this." And, you know, we did talk about hard work, but throughout your life, you've encountered obstacles, whether it be starting your trapping career back in the fur boom when nobody that was experienced was sharing information. So kind of, we're going to pivot now. So kind of touch on those obstacles and how you kind of muscled through, you overcame them to put yourself where you are today with, you know, your trapping, your career, Coyote U, whatever you'd like to talk about.
Yeah. You know, without getting, you know, too laying on the couch in front of a doctor type stuff, you know, a lot of the obstacles I think that I overcame had to do with what I talked about with the early divorce of my parents and that upbringing thereof, and being the only guy in town without a dad in town, and a lot of you know, overcoming that, you know, even though I can't conscientiously say this is what I did, I just got through it, right? You know, and that, to me, getting past that, all these other things seem minor, frankly, as far as some of the other things. But yeah, when I was a kid during the fur boom, man, I tell you what, no one would tell you anything. And I just said, well, I'm just going to figure this out on my own. And through trial and error, I started getting better, and I started working harder and setting more traps and spending more time. And then the percentages caught up. And, one thing with me, even today, that I know a lot of very, very good trappers that are very stuck in their ways. The system they have works, and they have no intention on changing it or trying anything new. Every year I try 20, 30, 40 different things new. I don't care if it's a bait and lure, it's a new kind of trap, it's a new kind of set, it's a new location or approach. I have an open mind. And that open mind, I think, has helped me get me through a lot of different things, and through business and trapping, and trying to look at both sides of everything. I always try to reverse things. When someone comes to me with an issue at work, or even my wife comes to me, I try to reverse it, and I reverse it on them, and I reverse it on me, and say, how would we react? And that's a good way sometimes to look at things. So, at the end of the day, my personality and my desire to understand what's over the next hill, or my curiosity of wanting to know what's over that next hill or behind the next bend in the creek, is what has played out with me my entire life. And not being satisfied with, okay, today's great, right? We're here. It really can't get a whole lot better. Why do I need to improve it? I want to go to the next step. Even with our small little farmette, we have an opportunity to maybe get some land next to us. And Gina's like, isn't it ever enough? Why do you need that extra 18 acres? Because it's there, and it's a new challenge. And there's really some really cool trees on there that we don't have on our property. So it's that constant wanderlust that I think is innate in a lot of people. And I certainly am guilty of having that.
Mike, let the record show that this is our second consecutive podcast guest that refers to the stream as crick. So we're getting the right guess. Yeah, we're getting the right guess.
Guilty.
So one of the things I picked up as I was going through your website, which, by the way, you can find Mark at coyoteu.com. That's just with a U. coyoteu.com. Was this really cool story about, well, there was two parts of it. One was you mentioned about having a conversation with Tom Miranda, and how that helped guide you. And I've had a chance to get to know him a little bit, and he's a good guy, right? And you learned that. But bigger than that, though, was that one of the things that stood out to me was this idea that you said you're always willing to learn, and that's key. So I agree with that 100%. I don't care how many fish I've caught, deer I've shot, ducks I've shot, whatever. I always feel like you can learn more, and there's a thirst to learn more. You don't strike me as the guy that's ever going to stand up there and say, I was put on this earth to trap coyotes. So
no, my dad would have had so much higher expectations for me than that. He was maybe president of the United States or something, but not that. But I guess so. You got to have something.
Yeah. So just tell us about that. I mean, I don't think, like you said, you're trying something new to this day, 10 to 20 different things or more in your 3-week trapping window.
Yeah. Coyote U is something that I came up with to help other people get to that next level. And I tell people, or other trappers all the time, go to as many guys. There's other schools out there besides mine. There's other instructors that have a different perspective. You'd be crazy if you can afford to not to go to as many as you can. And I still attend. When we have trapping conventions, they have demonstrations that I'm always on the ticket, but there's a bunch of other trappers that are there too. And people come to these conventions to go to these hour-long demonstrations to try to pick up something here or there. I still go to them. I'm going to something this summer. I was invited. It's called Coyote Days. It's out in Lusk, Wyoming. A guy named John Graham was a very good trapper, is hosting it. And literally the best of the best of the best coyote guys, because coyote prices are at an all-time high. They started this last year, and this year it's going to be bigger and better than ever. And I was flattered to be invited. So I'm going to that. Yeah, I'm happy to go, and I want to go, and I'm going to do a demonstration. But I can't wait to sit in front of people that I consider peers, but frankly are at a whole different level than I am. There's people out there that'll be at this show that trap and control coyotes year round. I'm a weekend warrior in their minds. I'm from what going back to, looking at yourself a certain way, I try to be the best I can over here in my backyard, and to compare myself to a guy that traps 365 days a year would be foolhardy. So I do the best that I can right here with what I have. And during my 3 weeks, you wouldn't want to be a coyote in central New York, but short of that, to be invited to this thing is A, great, but B, I want to sit with these guys and really get to know them, as a lot of them I know through the computer. I know them through their writings, but to shake their hands and meet them for the first time is going to be great. But I'll be sitting in the front row when they're talking and listening with both ears for sure.
And I guess that goes to prove the fact that you're never too old to learn, and as long as you're willing. And there's going to be something that I can almost guarantee that you're going to get out of that, because there's so much experience that you're going to be able to tap into, and being humble enough to walk up and shake somebody's hand and say, hey, you said this, and I'm really interested in that. Could you explain a little bit more? So even though when we talk about trapping eastern coyotes or northeastern coyotes, your name's always at the top of the list. To hear you say that, well, I'm going to go out here and be rubbing shoulders with these giants, and the fact that you still are humble enough and aware enough to really take a look at your life and say, guess what, there's more that I can learn, and I need to be okay with that, is how I think you got where you are today.
No question about it. And, it's difficult sometimes to have these conversations about yourself and others without recognizing, the word ego. And ego is a word that sometimes has, could be spun as a negative connotation. But I will tell you, man, the guys that I know that are really good canine trappers, that are what I would consider 1%ers, they're all very good at everything they do. They're all good in business. They're good in their whatever. Most of them don't trap for a living. So they're just those same type of guys. And I would never want to necessarily lump myself into that, but I see those characteristics of those same guys. And I like walking into the first sale with 10 times more coyotes than anybody there. I like that. And does that get into the ego thing? I don't know. It's like somebody with a 175 class whitetail. Yeah, you're happy you got it, but you also like showing pictures of it, So I ain't gonna lie to you. They put together the list of everybody that's doing demos at Coyote Days, and every single person that's out there is a Western state, and there's one lonely guy from east of the Mississippi, Mark Zagger, New York. And yeah, I ain't gonna lie to you. I don't mind that being there and maybe stroking the ego a little bit. But again, that's not why I'm going. I'm going for a lot of reasons, and I really can't wait for it.
Well, it's okay to like to win, that's for sure. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. And speaking of liking to win, as we come to the end here of our conversation, what I want to do is give you a chance to tell people how you can help them win. Tell them about Coyote U.
Oh, I appreciate that. We going back 20 years, when I first came to New York, I was catching more coyotes than the average guy. And for a long, long time, people said, why aren't you writing books? Why aren't you putting together videos back then, now DVDs? And I just never thought I was qualified. I thought my resume was sparse at best. And I waited 20 years and go back 10 years when I was, catching 150, 180 coyotes, no one even close to me, and I've slowed down a little bit as I got older. But that all said, I've always recognized, again, the self-awareness that you have about yourself. I've thought that there was an opportunity for me to maybe put together a program for other guys, and that I might resonate with people. So it took me a long time to do it, but I finally did it. And that's what we call Coyote U. So Coyote U is 2.5 days here at our place in central New York. It's what I call A to Z, soup to nuts. It's my entire program, nothing held back. First day's classroom, which sounds boring, but it's everything but boring. I have a PowerPoint presentation with over 600 photos and videos as backup to everything that I'm talking about. If I say, here's how I make my dirt hole, or here's the location I pick, I show video proof and or photographic proof of why. And then the second day we go out on my trap line, go around to my farms, and I show everybody locations, which really seems to be an aha moment for guys. Trapping, when you trap muskrats or mink or beaver, it's you set on sign. You see a raccoon trail, you set a trap on it. You set a muskrat den, you put a trap. Coyote and fox trapping is more of a science. It's location. You pull into a farm and you look around, and you might get lucky and find a track or some turds, but you're really looking at contour and features and how things come together, and trying to kind of get in front of them that way. So a lot of new trappers struggle with location. So a big part of it's that. And then the third day, which is only a half day, is all fur handling. And as I often joke, I think I'm a pretty good coyote trapper, but I know I'm a good fur handler because I win every year. I win the top awards at any sale I go to, or if I ship them to Canada. Gina says you can eat off my coyotes. I don't know if that's true, but if you're going to catch them, you might as well put them upright. And that's a big, and it's like anything. Everything gets easier after you do 1,000 of them or so. And so I try to cut down that learning curve for guys. So at the end of the day, I think someone coming to Coyote U, or frankly, any instructor with my level of experience, you're cutting a minimum of 5 years and probably 10 years off your learning curve. And it's money well spent if you want to get better quickly.
And I would have to say that I wish that the pandemic did not hit, because if it would not have, I would have already been a graduate of Coyote U. I was actually scheduled to go in April to Mark's class. So we met at the Pennsylvania Trappers Association convention last year, and I did sign up to go because it's the first time in my life I've had the job and the ability to be able to trap. And I'm excited. I mean, to have you on here and to have you and I almost pregame before I show up, but we had to postpone because of the pandemic. And so I guess we're still on for September 18th that weekend, I believe, correct?
Looking good right now. Yep, we're opening back up here in New York, so I'm going to remain optimistic and say we're going to be good in September.
So I will definitely have a story at the end of attending Coyote U, and then when I hit my first coyote season this fall into winter, I'll see how we do.
I warn you, it's addicting.
Well, I mean, I'm not shying away from it. It was something that I've always had a strong interest in. My great grandfather was one of the people that instilled that, not as a trapper, but someone that just had a trap in his barn. And as I told Mark, I think I must have set and sprung that thing off a million times. And it was just the fact that I never had the opportunity. I never had the correct job where I could trap before work. And now I do. And I'm going to try and, as Mark said, shave a few years off of my learning curve. And you do have to, and this is the same thing with you going out west, you have to go to someone that knows more than you do and that's willing to teach you to get anywhere successfully for me, in a time frame that is going to be conducive to my age. So, and you're not that much older than I am.
Well, a lot of the demographic that comes to me are older guys that are getting close to retirement. I say to them, like, really, honestly, how many good years do you have left physically that you want to do this? I'm not saying that you got a foot in the grave, but it's a physical game. And you don't see a lot of 90-year-old duck hunters out there. I mean, and trapping's the same way. So I tell guys, it's just, I don't try to talk them into anything. I tell them, go to anybody you want. Go to somebody and get better faster.
Well, Mark, we appreciate you being on the show. It was really great hearing from you and learning about you. Obviously, you're much more than just Coyote U, even though that's a big part of your life. And I can promise you there, when Mr. Groman comes up, he's going to be all in. So I'll be hearing about it and looking forward to seeing how that all turns out. So thank you again for being on the show. It was our pleasure to have you, and continued success with everything you're doing.
Really appreciate it. Thanks a lot, guys.
Well, Mike, I'm sure you enjoyed that because you're into the trapping yourself, and I'm a very novice pursuer of coyotes, if you will. I've only shot a few of them, and most of those were just by chance when I was hunting something else. And I know you've gotten into the trapping, but beyond all that, I think one of the things that really stood out to me about Mark was where he makes it a point to put on his website, and also talks about always being willing to learn, and not, as good as he is, not feeling like he's learned it all and he can't learn something. And I thought, to me, that just summed the whole thing up really well. I thought it was really cool, and probably is one of the reasons why he is where he is today.
Exactly. I think anybody that is able to reflect on their life and do these repeated self-assessments, it moves you forward in life. And as Mark has said, he's very comfortable doing these self-assessments and trying to figure out what needs to be next for him, how he needs to improve in life in general. And it's made him very successful as a businessman, as a husband, And as a coyote trapper, and we hate to hang one tag on somebody because we all have different monikers, if you will. But is this something that, for me, I really look up to him. I met him at the Pennsylvania Trapping Rendezvous, and I was supposed to, as I said before, I was supposed to go to his school because I have not really delved into the trapping world. I still consider myself a ridiculous novice because on Mark's advice, he said to me, you probably shouldn't trap, and this is talking about last year, 2019, 2020. He said, because just come to the school, we'll get you started off on the right foot. And so for the most part, I took that advice. I didn't really dive into trapping as aggressively as I could have, waiting on being able to get correct instruction from somebody that has already, over the past, 30, 40 plus years, really kind of made all the mistakes and is willing to teach people like myself the correct way, or at least a better way to do it, to really help that learning curve. So I'm really excited to be able to do that here in September.
Well, if you want to learn more about Mark's work, again, just the website is coyoteu.com. Check that out. And it's really impressive. There's some cool stuff on there. So, Mike, I got to tell you, as we're wrapping up this week's episode, I just did a coffee and deer show before you and I got on with Alps Outdoors, the backpacking outdoor exploring company. And we were talking about deer hunting packs, and we're doing it because literally in some places, by the way, Coffee and Deer Show, I should have mentioned, is a show for my real job at the National Deer Alliance that we do, talking deer topics. Check that out if you haven't. But at any rate, we're talking deer packs because in some places in the country, deer season is going to start here literally in a couple of months. How does that grab you?
It's something that I've been, I think, waiting for the past 4 years, because as you well know, and I know I'm trying to get away from talking about my education, but I was not able to hunt for as much as I could or like to because of my education. We were actually required to be in class every Saturday for the past 3 years. And then the last year I was working on my dissertation, which was actual full-blown research in the school district systems in Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania here. So I didn't have a lot of time. So I'm really excited about this season. You and I got to reconnect since you moved back from Ohio, and last year was good. I'm hoping this year's better, just for the amount of time we can spend out there chasing deer and kind of strategizing and having at it.
Yeah, and coming up with a lot of great blooper level content for the show here, which is that's almost a given. The B team will be in full effect, but it really struck me that, man, I better get out there and start shooting and get my act together here, because, man, turkey season ends and you've got summer activities in there, and despite dealing with the pandemic, things go really quickly. And yeah. So if you're listening to this and you're not prepared or thinking about getting prepared, it's coming. So you better get ready. So just I guess a word of caution. And I got to mention, Mike, one more thing here before we sign off. We finally got some rain last night, and I went for a run this morning, and the stream looked fishable. So I'm just saying, either this evening or tomorrow morning, might have to wade out there and give it a shot.
I am at the sole mercy of FedEx at this point in time right now. So according to Amazon, my stuff's supposed to show up here Saturday. So I'm actually waiting on that with bated breath for that to show up, and then I'm ready to go.
All right. Well, we'll be talking more about that here in the future. So just as a reminder, folks, if you haven't checked out our website, please do it, reddogroad.net. Get the articles there. You get the podcast there. You can sign up and get notified whenever a new article or podcast gets posted. You can also just subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Stitcher. You can find us anywhere you get your podcast. So please consider doing that, and also pass it along. We don't have a gigantic following as of yet, but the following that we do have really seems to enjoy what we're doing. And so that keeps us going, keeps us motivated. And we do this because we just like talking about the outdoors, and we like to share some of our stories with you. So with that, thank you again for listening to the Red Dog Road podcast. We hope you all have a great week. Take care, everybody.